Okay, Austin, Minnesota, retail operations, mechanic, 560, 460, 660. I worked for the company 2 weeks, putting corn pickers and plows and disc harrows together out in the warehouse. And one day, here come a guy, "Hey, rookie, yeah, come with me. Grab your tools." I just had a little red toolbox. Went in the shop. He hollered at a little guy over here named Al Hansen. "Hey, here's your rookie. Show him what you do." Okay, so it was the beginning of, for about 3.5 months, all I did was work on 460, 560 rear ends. I got to where I could do it in my sleep most of the time. They gave us somewhere between 16 and 18 hour flat rate to do that. My first one took 24 because I didn't know what to do. Thank God for impact wrenches when I finally figured out what that was for. Because if you touched the machine after a period of time, it'd fall apart. I had all the bolts loose. And towards the end of that, got so repetitious, I put a challenge to myself. You put the bolt back in the same hole it came out of. Now, how do you do that? Well, on the deck in those 560s, you know where you put your feet for the brakes and the clutch? Okay, each one of those bolts had their own wear characteristic. That's an example. Up underneath all that hydraulic fuel tank stuff, you know. Anyway, that's got to be a challenge. And one day I did do a 460 in 4 hours and 40 minutes, or 8 hours and 40 minutes.
Did it live?
Huh?
Did it live?
It did. It did. But it had a zipper on it and it came apart quite easily. It was a new machine, it hadn't been used, so it was just like taking a new one apart, which it was, and away we went. The toughest was the 660. I don't know if any of you people got 660s. They came out of North Dakota. There at Austin. We did it for the region, and there were 7 of them, and I did those. About the only thing that didn't change on that tractor when we did that update for the 660 was a radiator cap. The rest of it was new. Engine, parts, TA, transmission, final drives. And that machine had those differentials out there. What a pain to get apart. And we had to put and make up a jack stand affair to pick this thing up. And the first one took me 120 hours, but I got it down to into the 30s, which was flat rate finally. But that was my baptism. Okay. Then there's been some of us hear stories this morning about, "Hey, come with me." Literally. District manager, shop foreman's office. He's all dressed up in a suit and tie. They come out and got me off the floor. "We're going to take your tools away from you." Ooh, shit. What did I screw up? It was the latter part of the season, and I thought maybe I did a major no-no, and nobody told me about it. And he said, "Monday morning we're going to give you a shirt and tie and a pickup truck with keys. That's the end of your tools." So from there in Austin, I was transferred up to, went from Austin to Mason City. I worked there for about 7 months, and then here come Berlin crisis and another story. From there I came back and then eventually went to St. Paul. Worked up there a couple months and became a service training instructor at Hickory Hill. There was a couple notes on Hickory Hill about a photographic center. Well, we were just happened to be located there. This photographic center belonged to Senator Brooks, and Harvester purchased it. And in the industry of advertisements, it was known as East Hollywood. because outside of California, it was the biggest studio that put together films. And you, from the outside, you didn't even know that existed, but you get in this huge metal building and there was studios and cutting stations and viewings. And when the red light was on the outside, you dare not even take a step. Sound. They wanted it utterly quiet when they were shooting videos, or, well, that was before videos, but 16 millimeter films in those days, those static through the system would be picked up and put into those films, and they wanted it quiet. And we, as a service training center, we were just outside the noise zone, so we could run dynamometers and so forth, but there was a gate and there was a red light on, and if the light was on, you couldn't go through the gate. But anyway, from there, I was a coordinator in manuals. What's that? Operator's manuals, parts books, service manuals, and we, at that time we had a flat rate manual. We had to do a job 3 times to get the proficiency. Then we would establish the time for overhaul engines and so forth, mainly tractors. And during that time, I had a short stint going to the Eastern Bloc countries. I spent different parts of 1971, 72 in Hungary. Took me 6 weeks to where I could count beds, cut their needs, feed them. No familiar words. I didn't speak German. A few of them spoke German, but they told me if I knew any words, don't use it. Because of World War II. But eventually I got to where I could say, Jona put Kavano. You waste a got Kavano. Good morning. Good night. Klutsch is a wrench. Kalapach is a hammer. Manakasa Kalapach is a big hammer. And one day there was a clutch went out of a 1256. Right, wasn't far from where I was staying in a chicken coop, literally. Was a hatchery for chickens, and they converted it into a hotel in Babona. And they said, good tractor, no good. The good tractor had a problem, and what it was, I had to go put this clutch in on Saturday morning with a fellow, and he didn't speak German, and he didn't speak English. About 4 hours, drove out of the shed. He worked on one side and I worked on the other. I worked out his toolbox. But I knew what the word klutz and kalapats and a few other little words. I hadn't learned the slang words yet, but I could hear them over there. Oh yeah. And then I did a short stint in Russia during this time. I spent 3.5 months over there at one time. Oh God. But we had fun with the boys. You could tell who they were. They had shiny shoes, new suit, butch haircut. They're about this tall. KGB. Little story. Come to think of it, I don't have it here. Anybody know what a 56 blower is? Okay. We had one over there. My deal was to go over, it was a World's Grasslands Congress in Moscow, and we had to set up a baler and a tractor and other accumulating things for chopping hay, corn, and a blower. Caston wagons, we didn't make an unloading wagon at that time, so we used Caston as a part of the contract. And we prided ourselves, we could blow silage 105 feet in the air. And we wanted to put the American flag up there, and oh shit, that didn't work. So we put IH up there, and 2 flags on either side. And the Russians had to be on the right, and we had to be on the left. Another fracas. Geez. But anyway, here come the lady with the purse. She'd come from all directions, and she had a scarf, a long blue coat, this little flat purse about the size of paper, about that thick, and rubber boots. It's typical for East European women. That's their garb for the day. Well, that's the way she would walk on the site. And she'd stand there a minute, and she'd kind of go like this, like there's something wrong with her. And this goes on for a time, several days. And I asked her, finally I challenged her, I said, "Jo jeszcze gadkowano." That's good day. Prospecta, meaning you want a brochure? Yet. Okay. So I stood there, and finally she shakes herself and takes off. Well, for the next weeks, she was there every day. But when she came at different angles. Well, she'd come walking out of the bushes over there, and she'd come out of a building over here. What the hell is she doing? You know, when we'd asked among ourselves, we asked our translators what she was doing. They had a clue. She wouldn't say a word other than knit. So some time goes by, and we got alerted that a delegation of important people coming. Big deal. That was every day, because we'd have schools from 8 to about 10, and then from 10 on there's the tire kickers, although they didn't have any money to buy anything, but the schools, engineering schools, would come and visit with us. We thought maybe it was some big school deal. No. And then some extra guys started to show up, guards. So the day comes, and they said, "Okay, you're having a special person," but they still didn't tell us who it was. Can we take pictures of them? Sure. See your camera. Okay. So then they said, "Go over here by that water tower, and you line up. Oh, they'll be here in a minute." Well, here they come. About 35, 40 people. Entourage. Some of them had long coats and funny bulges underneath them. Do you know what Uzi is? Well, they had them. And I looked at that guy. Oh, yeah. Breast nut. For 2 weeks, we were grilled by the agriculture department, best I could say, on each of those pieces of equipment, and somebody was proficient in Russian was going to explain to him what that piece of equipment he was looking at. And we were just supposed to stand back, and if they got stuck, these people knew English, so they'd turn, if need be, ask a question. Well, they get over by this 56 blower, and they're there for 20 minutes. What the hell do you talk about on a blower for 20 minutes? Should have been a walk by. And they're jabbering away, pointing up at our sign, International Harvester coming. Oh, what the hell's going on? So we had this 18-year-old who was just studying to be a lawyer. He was to be next to this group in case we got stuck, because then he could turn to us. And so I walked up to him, I whispered in his ear, I said, "Mark, what's the matter?" He said, "I don't know, but they keep pointing down there." He says, "I don't know what they're pointing at." And then they're pointing at the sign up there, International Harvester Company. I said, "This isn't on the program." No. I said, "Well, ask that guy what's going on." Then he got his finger way down by the PTO on the big flat piece there. There was a little decal. It was about this long, maybe a ½ inch wide. It says McCormick. I didn't even know it was there. But one of those guys found it. And the 20 minutes was explaining McCormick, International Harvester. And so well, the entourage continues, and of course, then this time we stepped back, and we had the leaving reception line, and Marguerite, one of the little translators, and Vera was staying here, and me in the middle. We had Dick Kornberger. He was a big German guy, had a big white international cowboy hat on, and Brezhnev come by and thanked us and everything. I said Dobru to him, and the girls did too, and gets over here to Dick, and old Dick, he does it in his subtle way, and he said, "Hey sir, how the hell's your day going?" And he takes about a step and a half. Going just fine. Perfect English. Everybody knew what was going on. But those are some of the things we stumbled into even today. Okay. Then as we're being the service instructor at this time, we had a guy, we called him Grandpa Munster because that's who he looked like. His name was Ken Carmen. He was a professor of English and speech delivery. Oh God. When he showed up, and every time International Harvester had a meeting or was a presentation, Ken would show up with his stopwatch. And you're on the stopwatch, and he's sitting out there, and he doesn't have a clue what you're talking about. But you got to take that engine all apart, hydrostatic apart. One of his criticisms was, if he fell asleep, you had to kick him out of class. 2 signs. Get rid of the guy, he's either been out too late the night before, which they did do, or you as a deliverer aren't keeping his attention. And so sometimes, I did one time, it took us, opening statement, supposed to be 90 seconds, took us a day and a half to figure out what to say after he got done with us. But by the time he was finished with you, you were so damn glad to teach the school and they're gone that it was really easy. In those days, we only taught 6 people at a time, whether it be hydraulic, diesel, or engine-wise, but it was a very enlightening time for me. And then 75, came back from one of those trips, and they moved me from writing books. They said, well, we're going to change your job. And Elmer Ledke was a service manager for combines worldwide, and so I replaced him. And a couple of days later, they said, you got to go to the field. Well, that's when I met Camille Beert, and we become travel buddies for a couple of years, several years. During those times, as a service manager on combines, I also had assignment to do cotton pickers and hay balers. Working in service, once in a while, we get mixed up in sales. You never know when you're going to sell something. Much less me, I'm not a salesman. Vernon, Texas, Pearl Harvest. I catch this guy coming out of his hotel room, and I knew that he worked for Texas A&M. And come out of his room, and he had 2 suspicious silver cylinders in his hand covered up with a cap. Beer. And so I said to him, this is like 6:30 in the West, Dr. Phil is his name. I said, hey Phil, you guys going out and check barley quality today? No. I said, bullshit, what do you do there? Oh. And we kind of giggled over it, and he left, or started to leave. He put the cans in the vehicle, closed the door, and he turned. He says, hey, come here, what are you? You know all them big red combines around here? Yeah. You got any little ones? What do you mean little? Well, I need a combine, but I don't want them big 1480s and 1680s. We want a little one. Do you have anything? Yeah, 1420. So, over the winter, Mundy, Texas. Doug Parker, I think was his name. Yeah. Doug Parker. Hey, you know Dr. Phil? Yeah. Well, he's in there and wants to buy a combine. I said, well, sell it. But it's a 1420. So, I never sold one. Don't worry about it. Just sell it. We'll be there when you deliver it. I was. And it missed a couple of things on the line, so we had to go and put a grain loss monitor in that little dude one morning at 4 o'clock a.m. and I showed up, and we sold them a tractor. I don't remember the size. 2 trucks, tandems, and they bought a header cart from somebody and a combine trailer. And then this 20. And when I drove up there, the 20 was up on the trailer. All because of 2 cans of beer. Okay, part of what Dan asked me to do, give a presentation, and well, what am I going to talk about? You all know about corn, soybeans, wheat, barley. But what about pyrethrum? Salicornia. They're both oil seeds. Anise, another oil seed. You women know about anise. Oh God, you get one of them combines? Smell like it's sitting in a candy bar. It wasn't to the point of being nauseating, but you knew where you were. But once we got out in the field, got the windows open, got some fresh air in there, and then finally ran the machine enough that we got the air replaced in there. But pyrethrum is a painted daisy. Off. The oil from that daisy plant or pyrethrum is in here. It's an insecticide. And sometimes you go to the nurseries and you look on the tag and you'll see in parentheses it says pyrethrum. Well, then that oil ingredient is in here too. Now, we harvest it. And the way that we harvest it, we separate the oil portion of the plant and put it in a grain tank. So they determine during the day or days where the oil level is in the plant because it keeps moving up and gets into the bud. And so they want to capture the bud, the seed, and the part of the stalk's got the oil. Now when you're out there working on a machine, you have to wear an air suit. Because if you don't, that stuff that's in there starts working on you. So as you get out of the truck, you have to put this air suit on, get battery operated backpack, and go do your thing. But they'll caution you, don't get on the machine unless you have a suit. Much less the guy inside's got one on too, although he's sitting in air conditioning. When he gets out, he has to put that on. They don't have to, unless you don't want to. Some of you guys been in Milo? Itchy stuff? There ought to be a law against raising Milo. Get off an airplane, first stop, grocery store. Grocery store. Yeah, you got to buy a box of cornstarch. When you get out in the field, you look like a mummy. Plug up your skin so it doesn't get in and itch. Anyway, the next one I mentioned was Salicornia, another oil seed. You've all seen it. It's grown in the tidewater throughout the world. Very high in oil. Grows about 30 inches tall, 36 or so. When the leaves are on, of course they're off of here, but what you see there, the bigger part of the stem is the seed cell. In each cell section, in the surrounding part of the stem, there's 10 seed cells. And when you open this up, it looks like ground pepper. So again, it's high in oil. about 30%, one of your highest oil seeds in the world, growing in the tidewater. You don't need any insecticide, and you don't need any herbicide. And neither one of them grow in saltwater. And we do irrigate it, have in the Salton Sea in California, where this plant came from. They irrigate it every 6 hours, just as if it was in the tidewater. So the water comes up, submerges this plant, and then goes away. Well, here we just sprinkle the water. Well, in the doing of that process, the plant gets coated with salt. But you still got to harvest it. So out we go, and it's just like harvesting alfalfa. Again, it's high in protein, high in oil, and you can use it for a food product to feed donkeys, goats, and sheep. But you can't feed the cow. You kill a cow. Cattle do not know the limitation in salt. They'll eat enough that it will eventually kill the critter. So in those areas, especially the Middle East, but not right now, but Saudi Arabia especially, we have harvested and do handle the seaweed. Now if you go into Nova Scotia area of Canada as an example, over there it's called sea asparagus. And you can buy it off a salad bar. And they strip off the outer, and you can eat it just like if it's a celery or something like that. There's some other seeds here. I won't get into them except for one. How do these get in the sack? They're all dry. The one on your far right, what's it say?
Watermelon.
Watermelon. We do that with a combine too. What a mess. What a mess. 706, northeast of Stockton, California. Ingenuity. 80 combine. Anybody know what an 80 combine is? Beautiful little dog. Anyway, there she is, all black. Stink. Oh my God. Bugs. Oh my God. Flies. Ugh. Thank God there's a cab on the tractor. We take the combine, and it's been modified, of course, and we keep the seeds after we've thrown the melons in the front end. So they're all laying in a windrow, and there's 6, 8 boys in front throwing the melons in the header, and away we go. Do the same thing with pumpkins, squash. That's how we get the dry seeds. You can buy pumpkin seeds out of the shell or in the shell, but mostly out of the shell, similar to sunflower seeds, and eat them, so you don't have to spit out the seeds like the baseball players do when they're in the dugout. But anyway, do it with have done it with the combine. Then there's other seeds here, bachelor buttons. And that's $2 for that little pack. What's that mean to a bushel? I don't have it, I didn't figure it out, but it's expensive. And those all average about $2 a packet, more or less. There's one in there is some grasses, very light. Probably only is about 10 pounds to the bushel, if that. What do you do with a cleaning system? Well, basically there we just use it as a sieve, as intended. We run just enough air to keep the sieves clean. Do the same thing with alfalfa and a few others. There's another odd one up here called meadow foam. You women use it in your makeup stuff. It's a high oil seed grown in the Northwest. Why it's called meadow foam is when it's blooming, that's what the field looks like. It's been covered with foam. It's a white plant. similar to the mustard family. It's a real rough, coarse seed. It's much like hybrid sugar beet seeds, real rough, hard to handle in planters and so forth. But anyway, that seed was growing in that area. One of its attributes, not used too much yet, there is some restrictions in the government that sometimes you have to use biodegradable oils. You can't use diesel fuel, you can't use grease, you gotta use other things that can do the same thing. And this viscosity of this oil with temperature change doesn't change much. And so there was serious consideration during its early development it would be brake fluid. And it could be used, could be. It's not yet, but that was part of its intention during its development, is to be a biodegradable oil for some nature. Anybody here from Texas? Vernon, Texas? Guar? G-U-A-R? It's a bean. It's used in cosmetics, other industrial, polishing agent, gunpowder. If you go to the plant, you can only go in the front door. It's guarded, they won't let you go into the plant because of security reasons. But it is a bean growing in Texas. Sunday morning, I was watching the grain loss monitor and it'd go up and go down, go up and it'd go down. And the guy didn't change speed. And they were complaining about combine loss. Didn't say whether it was rotor or cleans, they just complained. So I got out of the combine, looked on the ground, yep, it's there. But every once in a while the straw's on top, and then it's gone. Now where the straw's on top, there's grain on the ground. Where there's no straw on top, no grain. But the guy drove the same speed. But I looked at standing crop. There's a rainbow effect. Green, tan, green, tan, green, tan. So I walked over and I thought, well, it's probably suckers, which happens in barley and wheat, and I looked at it. There's about 3-4 inches of brown and then 3-4 inches of green. Never seen that before. Also, what was in the same spot where it seemed to be more green than others was the barley straw was pretty much whole. I've never seen that before. Normally when you harvest barley, you can hardly keep it solid enough to get it out the back that it doesn't turn to dust. But I didn't have that here. And so I typically make a yield sample, so I yanked off my 4 square feet, and there happened to be a wheat field just next door, and I went over and I talked to our customer and I said, do you suppose he'd mind if I relieved him of 4 feet of wheat? No, I'd just go take it. So I did. Monday morning, I'm in the shop with a person that's got this 7088, and I'm going, damn, I got to hand thrash this, and I'm not doing too good, taking too long. The better part of 2 hours go by, and Occam Wright, the customer, he come in, what are you doing this morning? I said, well, I'm not doing very good. I thought maybe just because the sack laid overnight and got too wet and so on and so on. But I said, I can hardly separate this wheat and barley out of these heads. Okay. I said, one thing I'm noticing, the stalk's awful wet. It was wet yesterday and it's still wet. But the grain's dry, yep, probably 10-11%. And that's not good for brew barley. They don't want you to skin it, nick it. If it's skinned and nicked too much, it's feed barley. And so money, 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 money. Anyway, I finished my deal, back to the field, and now I look more stringent at what I was doing. And we changed fields, changed customer. And here I'm walking through the field, and the barley had gone through the combine, but the seeds are missing. The straw looked like it had never been through the machine. I reached down with it like this, and I go, oh my cow. It's wet. Like I dunked it in a bucket of water and pulled it out and shook it off. I twisted it. I'd never seen barley like this, and about that time, Heino, he come around driving by, and I went like this, and he goes, "So, what's new?" Well, anyway, I wrote a letter back to here, you thought the bomb went off because it's taking a lot of horsepower to get that wet stuff through there. I got kernel losses and all the other things associated with wet straw. Summary, closing statement. If I was in South Louisiana, Arkansas, boot heel, I swear I was cutting rice. And since I changed my mind thought to handle the combine as rice, bingo, home run, no loss, go like hell. How fast is the competition going? I don't know. And got that far. But prior to doing some of these changes, we were running about 1.5, 2 miles an hour with a 24-foot head. And that's barely creeping when the guys had been running maybe 3.5 to 5 miles an hour. Well, how fast is competition going? I don't know. I sat on the road in the car and I counted the bars going past the ladder, and it's going 1, 2, 3, 4. They're going about a half mile an hour. Loss. The straw was full of green. You can shake it underneath. Over there, you just don't walk out in somebody's field. You got to go ask permission, and then they may or may not give you the okay to do it. Because I did do it once and I got challenged. The guy, here he come in his car, and I did something wrong. I thought I was in the right field, but I was in the wrong field. Never happened before, but another story. But with a little analyzation, I didn't get a complete answer. Customer says, since we have started to spray with fungicide, our harvests have moved through time, and that we're about 2 to 3 weeks later than we were 5 years ago. Why? The straw's wet. But he said, we're in trouble with the brew companies because they don't want to neck the grains. 8% barley? Did you ever do that? That's like handling glass. And he says, we're checking our fields more frequent to catch the grain at the right moisture, and to hell with the straw. The straw people love it because it's all in one piece, but we're having to pay extra fuel to get the straw through the machine to get any performance out of it, and so on and so on. Wow. But he said, it's here. We've got it. Our harvest is 3 weeks from what it has been in the past, and it's a way of life. So I came home, and I'm still being chastised. So I called John Ross, hunting buddy, and I knew he went to K-State, and I said, hey, I'm in trouble. I need some help. I said, a fungicide in Europe, and we got green straw. It's wetter than hell. Straw and the grain's dry. And what did I see? I needed an explanation, brown to green. And this guy got on the phone, and chit. He's the attorney or judge, and I'm giving my still spiel. And finally, he said, God forbid we ever get that shit over here. What's the matter? He said, what you saw was exactly correct. The green spots on the stalk is encapsulated in the fungicide. It's like putting a plastic bag over the plant. Where it's brown, the plant grew and didn't get sprayed. So every time it's sprayed, you could count 4 or 5 different zones, and that would be how often the people sprayed the crop. And guess what? Just this year, hey, you ever seen green nuts before? Off a tree or where? No, wheat. we're starting to see some of these same situations here, but we have a drier climate here and they don't. And so this fellow from K-State said, what you see is the moisture is trapped in the leaf or the stalk. The plant has developed, matured, but the moisture has got to travel away from that area of being green and go to an area where the brown is to evaporate. Makes sense. Now, as a result of being over there and having been in the South and did rice, set the combine up to do rice, answered a whole bunch of questions. Grain loss went down, grain damage went down, throughput increased. Didn't get all that much horsepower back, but did gain a little bit, a couple tenths, mile an hour. But I had a couple calls already from the field, friends. Hey, remember that story, East Germany? Yeah, well, we got it over here now. Times change. Oh, the daisy, painted daisy, I got a little story there. I'm full of stories. This growing on the island of Tasmania, and I get a call from Bob Matusik. Hey, I got a green sample here from Tasmania. What is it? Pyrithium. You know anything about it? Never heard of it. Oh, I'm going to send you this sample. I want you to take a look at it, and you tell me how you're going to set the combine. Okay. So he did. Now, when you get done looking at it, I got to have it back. Why? We have to send it back to Tasmania. You got to be shitting me. Nope. Because if I don't, probably the custom people and whatever else. But anyway, I got rid of it and sent it back to him, and he sent it back on down to Tasmania because you get involved with some of these specialty seeds. You don't want your competition knowing what you're doing. Well, this is one of those where don't want the competition knowing what's going on. But that happened in 2000, between 2000 and 2005. There was different iterations in there. We had to do a little difference with the machine, setting it up. And I had learned what we did in Annis in France, raising the cutter bar higher and higher. And some people said, well, why don't you use a straw chop, or not a straw, forage harvester. Header didn't go high enough, and it got too much trash. They couldn't keep the quality of the plant of oil being delivered to the processing plant. So that's where the combine came in. Las Mochas, Mexico. Oh damn! What's all them red square blocks out there in the field? Getting down. Looked like flowers as we're coming into the airport. So I asked the fellow that picked me up, I saw some red fields out here. What is it? Oh, it's marigolds. What are they used for? Oh, we feed the chickens. Well, I thought he was joking me. No. Literally, the marigolds are fed to the chickens because the Mexicans like dark yolk eggs. Funny, isn't it? So what they do is they go out and pick the flowers, bring them into this drying processing plant like we would up here for alfalfa. Then they take the end product, take it out, put it in the feeds for the chickens and feed it, and now they get real dark yellowy looking yolks. But we got to harvest the seed. So anyway, unique. Vegetable seeds. That array is only part of them. But here's an unusual one. Onions. Southern California. The boys go out and pick off the buds, put them in a sack, go weigh each sack, then they take it up, dump it on a canvas. This canvas might be anything from 1/4 of a mile to a half mile long. Then every day for 2 weeks they're turned to dry it. Of course, in the process of drying, some of the seed cells open up, little black seeds go down on the canvas, and okay. So here comes Max's daughter, Judy. with her 1680, 2188. She parks on top of the canvas, and there's a couple boys up front, start feeding it by hand, and there she goes, put, separating the onion seeds. Now when she gets down at the end, turn right around, come right back and do the same thing all over again. So they do it 2 times with the machine. Then they come back, pick up the canvas, and take it to a stationary separator. So they make sure they get every seed, because at those days the seed was 18 cents a pound out of the field, but must be clean, pristine, and all that stuff, because they don't want a monkey with a lot of trash going into those little sacks. And so Judy, she'd do this. She worked with Atlantic Seed. That's all she did all year outside of wheat and barley in the early harvest in Southern California. But that's all she did all summer long by the hour, is to harvest some seed for this Atlantic Seed Company. What was one of his advertising gimmicks on the TV? This has been a couple of years ago, but he'd stand there and he'd pride himself, and he loved it.
Hey, Jim, that might be a good question for you.
Okay. Okay. What he liked was, maybe I should stop there, huh?
Yeah, I think you should ask.
Anybody know what part, where I'm going to with this little advertise?
Every kernel pops.
No?
Blowing the top off the,
What?
blowing the top off the corn popper was a
No,
good thing.
no,
and one
no,
made this
no.
color.
He held the jar up when he was on TV and said, he pointed at it.
There's a bag over there, if anybody can tell us what that was.
Well, he's holding a jar. Glass jar.
Moonshine.
Keep coming? I didn't hear.
Moonshine.
No. Well, with Mr. Welcome Weaver, you didn't talk that because he was a preacher.
All the more reason.
Well, I guess I'll have to
I
kind
guess I'll give it a chance.
of. Anyway, he held up a glass jar, and he was proud of the fact that the seeds were shiny.
Not Mars.
No Mars. There was nice shiny seeds. It was like it was polished, and you paid for that extra. Well, I get a phone call. 2 gentlemen. Hey, we understand you know how to set a combine for chip corn. Yeah. We also know you know how, because I've been working with I called Weaver, Orville. I've been working with Weaver Popcorn Company, and they were kind of getting ahead of the market, and they were losing money. So Orville people from Hunt Wesson and not Conagra, but Hunt Wesson and I forget the other company in a moment. Anyway, Jim Horton calls me up and said, understand, we'd like to have a little meeting with you and maybe an engineering representative, Bob Francis. Okay. We're going to be kind of on a tight schedule when we come in by plane, so we just soon stay in the airport in Moline. Okay. Hey Bob, can we get something arranged? Oh yeah, I know the airport manager. No problem. We'll get us a room. Call them back. Set it up. Here they come. Briefcases. Got the room. They walk in. Set their briefcases on the table. Plants. They're doing a survey. What are they looking for? Bugs. They don't want nobody taping anything. Security. And we sat down. I'd never met these guys before. And we started talking popcorn. We talked for 2.5 hours, and we said, well, we'll go to the plant and we can show you some of this stuff. Oh, no, nope. We got a plane to catch in a little bit anyway, so we didn't go to the plant. After 2.5 hours Mr. Hinton says, hey, you had some sugar daddy with unlimited pockets of money. What would the machine look like to harvest popcorn and have no damage? Well, what are we going to do? I sat there and looked at Bob for a moment. He looked at me like, it's a good question. And finally I said to Jim, I said, well, I really don't know what the machine would look like. I think I would have to start with our axial flow. For what I know, and working with your competitor, Mr. Weaver, I guess that'd be my starting baseline. But come to think of it, why don't you guys do a little changing instead of us? Now I'm starting to talk like Bud Jewell. So what do you mean? We've got the machine and we can do so much without a whole lot of changes. But why don't you guys investigate the corn itself? He kind of frowns. Explain yourself. I said, well, why don't you design the plant such that when it's mature, the seeds are all loose in the seed cell in the ear. Hell of a good idea. Then his comment back, he said, just what would that machine look like to get that ear sac off the plant and you get the kernels in the green tank or some captive thing? We've been there, done it. Oh, thank you for your time. And they left. They didn't get an answer. We didn't have an answer. But in those days, Redenbacher took every ear that they harvested, took it into the plant, dried it down just like we do with hybrid seed corn today, through same operation. Then when you get all done, you got to reload the cobs up and haul them back to the guy that gave them to you. There's a problem here. There's two things wrong. You got transportation on something that two ways, it's costing you money. Well, if you leave the damn cob in the field in the first place, make money, more money. Yeah, I guess we would. So some time goes on, and I get a call, George Curtis. You ever done popcorn before? And this is a service rep, much like Ed Powell and the rest of us that had come off the territory. He lived in Champaign, Illinois. He said, or he's asking me, and I said, yeah, I've done it. He says, well, I got an opportunity to do some separation of popcorn. Oh, okay, where? Oh, I can't tell you. I said, is this Hunt Wesson by chance? He said, yeah. Okay, what are we going to do? He said, oh, well, I really can't tell you. How do I set the machine up? He said, well, first off, it's going to be stationary. Stationary? Yeah. We think we got it figured out. We're going to go find us a Series D Minneapolis Moline stationary corn sheller. You know what that is? Anybody been around one of them? I was when I was about this tall, but anyway, they went and found the drag off one of those and shoved it in the corn crib. Drove the combine up to the hopper end that was for the sheller. Took the real drive pump off the header, hooked it onto the chain drive where it drove the conveyor system, and started conveying popcorn into the combine. I don't know how much they did. I don't know how much time it had to take for preparation and all that, but George did say they let the corn pile up in front of the feeder house as it was coming out of the crib, such that the combine would finally get a hold of it and separate it, put it in the grain tank. And I said, how did it turn out? And he said, stunningly good. They're shocked because Weaver had already been there, and we were working quite diligently with those people in Marion, Indiana. And even in Argentina, when those guys didn't know how to combine, they didn't know how to combine commercial corn, much less popcorn, but another story. Anyway, he said that we did quite well. And the information they got back, the performance is stunningly excellent. They were very surprised. Okay. Time goes by, another phone call from George and the dealer at Monticello, Indiana. There was a fellow that worked in the shop, farmer, had a 1660. He's going to be the first contract for Orville Redenbacher. Ooh. Now, there's a little problem here. They used uni harvesters. They just sold a whole bunch of those to these proposed customers for Orville, but now they're thinking of doing it with a combine? What are you going to do with all those new unis sitting out there? Much less, what are they expecting out of the machine, out of the field? We pretty well figured it out. We had the edge on that, but we had to go through a growing pain. So they had one contract, and guy's name was Bob Weaver. He was the host farmer for one of the Farm Progress shows over there, and did her thing. And so then the next year, we went from one guy to 3 guys. Now we got a meeting with the customers, the dealer. Here's what we're going to do to the machines. We're not going to destroy the machines. The fact that you can't do soybeans and corn, but the main emphasis is not to damage the popcorn. And in popcorn business, my goal in the field, damage 0.5%. Now when I'm doing Frito-Lay corn, it's 2 to 3%. Popcorn's more resilient, but we don't want to scratch it, because if you scratch it, Nick, it won't pop. Well, that's where the old maids come from. All right, so then we went from 3 contracts to 30. In doing this, we had meetings at Monticello with these people, to educate them, mindset. Here's what you got to do. There's money to be made here if you want to do it and pay attention to it. Either Frito-Lay or chip corns or Azteca. Azteca's quite not as proficient at it as Frito is. There's business in popcorn. There's a wide area that the popcorn is growing in North America. In Kansas, there's a spot where Weaver goes, and up in Marion, Indiana, and Orville has got their preferred customers. And a lot of times they'll walk in and they'll start talking to the guy, and he's got the equipment, but he doesn't know what to do. Now, don't know what to do. This happened just a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago this fall. A fellow we'd been doing some testing with in soybeans, and he said, hey, we're going to do these special beans for Pioneer. What kind of seed? I don't know, but they got to be kept separate, no damage. We get started, they're going to come and check us all out. Oh, yeah, okay. But I want to be there. Okay, that's how it was. We sanitized the machine 2.5 hours, clean her up, onto the field. One of the fortunate things, the 40 acres that we opened up with this combine happened to be the same seed that they were going to be separating for Pioneer and putting in a special bin and so forth. Okay. They want to know when we get started in this irrigated field of 240 acres, and we called them, Dunham come out. I didn't tell him who I was, much less, it wasn't the customer's machine, is ours. And we looked pretty good, I thought. Because I carry a few tools in my briefcase, little digital scales, moisture tester. I always check 100 grams. I don't need 1,000. I can tell you in 10 minutes whether they're in the ballpark or not. It's an industry standard that we use. 100 grams, much more than you can put in your hand, but you get a pretty good idea what's happening in the machine just by that small scale, because that's what they do when they go to the scale house, whether you're pulling a pickup truck with just a box full or double drops behind a semi. They only use 100 grams out of the whole mess. Tell you what you're doing. Well, anyway, did our thing. They come out, took a look at it, and Dunham turned to the customer and said, "You got her dialed in there pretty good." Brian says, "Hey, Minnihan, yeah, you hear that?" Well, hell, I was standing right beside him. Yeah, I heard that. He said, "We've never done this before, have we?" I said, "Well, this isn't our first rodeo." So he finished the harvest. I checked with him in December later as he delivered it, and he got a 50-cent bushel premium for 200 acres, except for the last truck. The last truck, he hauled 6 semis down to the terminal where he was told to, and at number 7, he only got 30 cents premium. And I said, "Brian, you won't do that again, will you?" What did he do? Why did I say you won't do that again? He swept out the bin and put it in the truck, and they took it down to the holding, and they don't buy garbage. Leave it alone. Take it and sell it commercially. That's what we'll do this year. See the little mistakes? Another mistake. This was Brazil. They should have harvested these edible beans 6 weeks before I got there. There's 4 1680s and 2188s out doing these edible beans, direct cut. And these engineer says, "Well, the moisture is 6%. And I go, "Holy cow. 6%. You know, it's glass." Picked a couple pods, put them in my hand. Oh my God, they were all split. And we're going to ask the machine to do better than that? I said, "Vega, look at this. This stuff is ultra dry. It's like handling glass." And the grain tank didn't look too bad. But we had a problem. We had between 10 and 18% damage out of the field, and the customer wanted a little less than that. And in the edible bean business, if we can, about 5%, you better be shutting things down, taking care of your business. I saw 2 problems. Didn't touch a wrench to the machine. And the damage, we list probably half of the damage went from probably 18 to less than 10%. And didn't touch a wrench. Why didn't I touch a wrench? Well, first off, the guy was sitting in the cab of the combine eating lunch. Unloading augers running. And we're in a kind of a black bean, and the top of the load turned white. Splits. Oh, okay. But before I looked in the truck, and it looked pretty good for as dry as they are. Well, I said to him, I want to drive with him, so we did. We went out and we came around the end of the field. We had quite a ways to go, like near to the parking lot or further to the truck. He had left the combine run on the previous. As soon as he came out of the cut, I restored, shut the 2 switches off, and he goes, and I went, what did I say? It's international. Pay attention to what you're doing and watch out for problems. Okay, over to the truck. I stayed in the combine while he finished unloading. And about 5 bushel left. Shut the unloading roll. Again, he got startled. The customer's down here, he's just dying to get that service truck out here and get wrenches slinging. And so I explained to Vega and the guys, I said, the machine's vibrating, and your ratio of metal to seeds is a lot less if you can keep her full. So you shut it off while it's running. It's going to start up. It didn't die. Wasn't plugged. The unloading auger is sitting there vibrating. You got 4 augers that's banging around in there. And these seeds all don't go out the end at the same time or the same rate when it's empty. Oh, yeah. So the next time, that message got through real quick. Good. I'm looking over here in this big Morton building. One, I don't know what was in it. It was, doors was closed, but the one I was looking into was over half full of these pearly beans. About 10 or 12 people sacking beans because logistically they can't handle bulk, but they can handle a sack. Then you can tie a sack on a horse or a mule or a donkey or whatever, or load it into a semi, either one. But logistically, the industry there isn't set up to handle a lot of bulk grain. They handle it in sacks. Well, anyway, I walked over there and we'd finished the beer and stand there and I said, Vega, you don't suppose those guys standing in that pile of grain there isn't cracking a little bit, do you suppose? So with that, I reached down and grabbed, I said, remember this? Yeah. I said, I think I'd be telling those 6-8 people standing in that pile of grain to get out of there. Why were they standing in the grain? They're barefooted. So the owner said, hey. So got them out. And when we got all said and done, we were at about 4 to 5% grain damage in the sack. So, and I didn't touch a wrench. So it's just observation. Pay attention to what you're doing. Sometimes they don't come very quick. It may take you a day or two to figure out, like that green stem barley business. And you wonder, what the hell am I doing here? But sometimes if you just sit down, think about it. What's going on? Answer the question, why? And a lot of times why isn't, we haven't seen it for the first time, so it's a little tough. And it may take a little time in order to get your answer. Now there's been, who heard the tractor tycoon this morning? Who heard, this afternoon, who heard Bud Ewell? Anybody hear Bud Ewell this morning? Well, he's kind of like a used car salesman. Sometimes he doesn't finish the stories. Florida? You mentioned Florida? Oh God, what a mess. Muck. Combine's all right, but just don't stop the auger cart when you unload on the go. Because if the auger cart stops, you are stuck. And we had 5 machines in the field, and they had 4 4-wheelers out there to keep things out of the muck. Because you get through about 30 inches of muck, you go through some slime, and then you hit the coral. Well, in the meantime, you've gone down subterranean by about 5 feet. And it's a carpet, and as long as you don't tear it up, you're okay. Well, the end of this story, as we were finishing up this field or getting started, the combine turns and goes away. I got on the radar. Hey, put your unloading auger out. I don't have a full grain tank. I put it out. Bud's kind of standing about where that door is, and there's a canal here, a little drainage canal. And I got a picture. We're trolling for alligators, and there's 3 of them underneath the end of the auger spout. They weren't very big. They were about this long, but they looked like rats going down the waterway. And I said, hey, Bud, what? We're trolling for gators. Look at there. Oh my God, he says. He didn't tell you that story. With the reliability responsibilities that we had for products for International Harvester Company, there was a team of peoples that we visited. We were assigned product lines, and I had combines, cotton, and hay balers because of prior experiences. There's other people on tractors and plows and planters. We had the authority, and we did do it, to walk to the assembly line end and pull a big switch. Stop production. Did it twice. And if you want to watch the bugs come out of the wall, do that. Now, I didn't go quite as far as one other guy did. He went and cut the chain. I didn't do that. I did stop shipping several times. Couldn't keep the bolts tight on a 815, 915 final drives. Tighten the plant, put them on a railroad car, send them to Arkansas. Top 2 bolts, take them out of your fingers. I said, Mike, we got to stop shipping. I know we got a problem. Simple. We dipped the final drives and we dipped the axles, but we didn't clean off the surfaces where the 2 came together. So there's paint runs up to 60 thousandths thick. Well, you smash all that together, even under torque, and jiggle it a little bit, it dissipates. Now you got loose hardware. Pretty simple. Okay. Either scrape or coat these surfaces so that we don't paint them. Okay. Back to the 20, or on to the 20. I'm out looking at her. Nice little machine. But had one big problem. Nothing wrong with the engine. Nothing wrong with the chassis. But the two didn't work together. And she at that time had 112 horsepower. But in the meantime, I came back in the same Harlan ARP, and I called her up. I said, I got a big problem to talk to you about. He said, what's the matter? That 1420 we're coming with. What's the matter with it? I want to talk to you face to face, sir. Coming out to your office, I'll be out there tomorrow. I said, I don't think we can wait till. I said, we got to do it now. And now I'm starting to talk like Mr. Yule. The two don't work together. We don't have enough horsepower at 112 to do the job that chassis requires. Oh. Will you put that in all writing? Yes, sir. Opening statement. We reject the building of the 1420 because insufficient horsepower, nothing wrong with the engine, nothing wrong with the chassis. You just got the wrong mess together, and we need at least 130 to wake it up. Well, if we went to 130 horse, we're only 10 horsepower behind the 1440s. We're getting too close to it. I said, hey, you didn't ask me to sell it, you just asked me to fix it, sir. Oh. I said, there's nothing wrong, we can build it, but we shouldn't go on the marketplace with it until we get the horsepower up. Because I'd already driven a machine that had 130 horsepower. The engine on there was a 310, which is in 706s. You guys, I didn't see any out here, but they're around.
Isn't that 358?
The first one, those had a 310. And then this 310 grew to the 58, but we jumped to 58, went to the 402. And that's what I was hoping that we'd get the 402, because that'd give us 130 horse, and it woke up the combine and it'd start working good. Well, anyway, we already had 1,700 engines sitting in Neuss, Germany for the next year's build. Well, we built them, but we did write the protest letter, give it to Mr. Stan Lancaster. He backed us, but marketing went ahead. Let the machine come, but it was a bad deal. I was working for a person, and he says, I want you to go down there in South Louisiana and see how much horsepower is coming out them engines for those 20s. Oh, Art, I'm not going to go. It's poison. It's den of snakes. Don't go. We already got the rejection letter signed, and Lancaster accepted it, so forth, so on. I'm not going. Well, he went.
Hey, Jim, maybe you explain Harlan ARP and Stan Lancaster's position. I'm not sure that you explained who
Oh, I
these
didn't.
guys are.
Harlan was the director of reliability, who I wasn't the direct report to. There was a guy in between me, but it didn't make any difference with Harlan. And then Harlan answered to Mr. Lancaster,
Who was vice president?
who was vice president at that time, yeah. And so we had a direct line to the top end without having to go through a lot of wiggle words, smoothing and so forth. But anyway.
And I can assure you, Minnihan and that you everybody.
Well, anyway, we went ahead and built it. But the second year it came out, it had 130 horse in it. They finally turned the screw and made a better machine out of it, and on down to Louisiana. And Art came back in 3 days, and he called me in and he says, you were right. What a bad deal was. Oh, what'd you find out? What'd you find out? Well, he said some of those engines down there were pumping 180 horse. And I said, you got to be shitting me. 180 horse? Why, that's almost as much as a 1480. They came out of the 190. But it took something like that to wake this little thing up and the people, because you get down there in southwest Louisiana, you get in that sticky gumbo mud. Oh, God. It's so bad, if you throw a mud ball against something white paint, you never got the stain off. you could use bienamine and all that other stuff, but that stain from that greasy oil, that's why I guess they got oil wells down there, but that stuff would stain white paint. And part of the reason we got rid of white wheels and went to silver because it didn't, another story. But it took that kind of horsepower to push that little chassis around the mud and still do a harvesting job. But as time went on, we came into bigger engines and woke it up, and by that time the markets moved on. And some people, including myself, I did a video, about 50 minutes long, about Know Your Combine Wheat. I purposely arranged to use this combine in that presentation. There was other machines we came along and used a 1680 to do corn, and then a 1660 to do beans, and so on and so forth. But the 14 was used to keep in the history. So in summary, we've had to do some different things with the machine. One of its good attributes, the machine's very accessible and adaptable to conditions. Because two guys can have the con keys out in 15 minutes and another set put back in, you got a whole new machine. Separator grates. The rotor's not all that bad. Those early ones, we could take them out in 40 minutes and be back in the field. So serviceability and accessibility to the machine got us into a lot of these specialty crop attributes. I do have a sample of the wild rice. You literally cannot walk where that 1460 is being driven. If you do, you go up, muck up to your waist. Worse than Florida. But the machine they float the machine on tracks. They're 5 foot wide, 100 in full tracks, and they run it with steering brakes so you can wiggle through the field. They get about 1,500 bushel or pounds to the acre. This stuff's 9 foot tall. We got 8 foot reels on modified headers, and we don't do too bad. Not a lot of acres. This happened, potluck, a sample up there is from Clearbrook. Well, Mr. Barrows was one of our earlier contacts. We went up there and worked with him to do the best we could, and we did surprisingly well. One of the things that makes wild rice expensive is not only growing it, but the process to get the hull off, or process the seed, because they go through the old Indian process. The Indians put it in a pot and then cooked the hell out of it. Excuse me. With heat, in the process of driving off the moisture, they also affected the hull that's around this thing. They call them wigglers, because when you drop it in a can of water or test tube, you can see it wiggle, and it burrows itself into the mud because of its construction design. Once we get it out of the field, we get on a hard surface and we lay a windrow of this stuff on the paddocks, pads, whatever. It's about 2 foot wide on the bottom, and it's a peak. And they have a tedder machine that's also a squirter. They call them squirters. They go along, and every day they disturb the seed and give it another shot of water. And they do this for 2 weeks. Then at the end of the 2 week period, after it's gone through a heat, just like silage does, the silage will get hot, or hay that's been baled moist, it goes through a heat process. Same thing happens to this rice. Then they take it out of the windrow and they put it into a balling mill, which is a roller furnace. You see them with asphalt companies, only miniature. And it goes through a cooking process, and then that cracks the hull so they can get the hull off. And then when you end up, you got the nice black seed. And that's part of their expense. That has to happen that way, or can't cook it. But they do take the hull off in that method. As a matter of fact, they are very stringent. There was a gentleman in St. Paul. He used to visit all the commodity grocery stores in the Twin City area, and he was checking their quality. and I happened to go to one of their meetings, and they were having a board meeting, and they invited me in there to sit down and just listen. And somebody was mad because when I walked in there, the room was very blue. Nobody was saying a word, but somebody was pissed. I don't know who it was. Never did figure that out. But there was a faint foul odor in the room. Okay. So this heated discussion was amongst about a dozen people. I didn't think I needed to be there to witness any of this. I can go do something else. So I walked out back to a little exhibit thing, and then pretty soon it was broke up. One of these guys came with a sample in their fancy jar, and he said, "Do you know what we were talking about in there?" Well, no, but something was not right. He said, "Here, smell that." Holy shit. You ever been in a swamp? South Louisiana swamp? Well, somebody had used lake water to process their seed. Very pungent. And it wasn't too long ago, or too long after that, I was in another environment. Mr. Roca up in Menominee, Wisconsin, he was one of the pride owners of the fancy red kidney beans that ends up on the salad bars. Again, I walked into this scale house, and it was as nice as any living room or living commodity facility in a house. It was carpeted, and it had a scale, balance scale with it, but the truck's parked beyond where the street is here. But the girls did the thing, the two girls, their daughters, and then the owner, he was a big boy. He liked nice toys. But when I walked in this particular morning, Norm was a little pissed, I could tell. But the whole atmosphere was pissed. And I felt I didn't need to be there, so I kind of eased around, and the main office part was on down. There's nice, fancy stuffed chairs, couches, and nice atmosphere. Big desk for big man. Here he come. I was sitting there a few minutes. They had a great big plastic bowl. And you've seen somebody pissed. He was taking big steps to get to me. And this don't look good. And he thrust this bowl underneath me, nose. I couldn't help but not smell it. You ever smell that before? Yes, sir. Where? Well, the result of northern Minnesota. What's it smell like to you? Swamp water. And it did. It had a very pungent odor. And the truck had just came from North Dakota. Now this is central Wisconsin, near east of St. Paul, that to receive these, and there's a semi-load, and they're going to reject a semi-load of red kidney beans. Now where in the hell, when you reject edible beans, what do you do with them? You can't feed them to a pig because you kill him. So there's several phone calls back and forth. And they became an agreement that they would divide the truck because they found where the pungent beans came from, and how Carol ever got to that spot, I have no idea, because she went out, took that same pan or plastic tub thing, she put the ladder against the side of the truck, went up, dip, back to scale house. So she's probably got a couple pecks of beans in this plastic tub. But they probed every square foot of that truck and never found it again. Even the spot where Carol took the sample from. Well, the shop foreman is kind of a sharp individual, and Worksmith is his last name. And he said, "Let's unfold the canvas." So they did, and guess what? Right where the ladder was, they left it in place, so identification. In the canvas, there's a little fuzzy spot where something had wore in it. And he spent the night in St. Paul, and they got a rain, and the puddle of water sat there and dripped in the sample. And Carol happened to get the whole thing. So it didn't get very big, but she happened to get the whole dip. But they still divided the truck, condemned the back half of the truck, and they kept the front half. In the food business, things can get very testy because of they want pure good products. That was another thing on the salad bars, you can tell the chef by the type of beans he uses on the salad bar. If you find no damaged beans in his fresh beans, that I call them vinegar beans, you know, if they're all the same, no damage, he had to pay extra for that. And this is what these people were after, was the premium beans. So, you know, it's not all a bed of roses out there when these guys are collecting these extra dollars, because they got to pay attention to what's going on up here. So, anyway, any questions? Sir?
Did you ever do any men?
No, no.
Flax?
Oh, yeah. Why do you say flax?
Just because it's a dying crop in the U.S., but Canada still raises
Yeah, I don't know why it is. Do you understand what flax is? What it's used for? The nylon's taken over the clothing industry. So we don't see cloth commodities made from linen very much anymore. In Europe, yes.
Well, you have to still use linseed oil.
Yep, we got oil plants. And the other thing is that it grows in a ball. And the trick is, even with the old 914s, we had to have a flax roll in front of the cylinder, is to crack the ball so we get it up and get the seeds out. Well, the axial flow, we handled it a couple extra times where the other conventional machines didn't do that. And so our loss potential on flax isn't as great. But we did have a problem with the stem, and we broke up the fighter, and they didn't care for that. They just soon have the stalk pretty much whole out the back. But here comes nylon and all those things, and so demand.
I had a customer come into my shop and he's telling me that he's coming up, I guess it came from Africa, new drought tolerant grass. It's called test grass.
Okay, I've never, it's new to me. Go ahead.
The seed is about 1/3 the size of alfalfa seed.
Okay.
It's
And they're called tough grass?
test grass.
Oh, test grass.
I guess there's somebody in western Kansas that is growing it for seed.
Is that Scott Seed Company out there?
It might be, I think I've heard something.
Yeah, they do a lot of those unusual.
I don't know.
I think I've heard that, I think about it.
I've worked with that company before. They do a lot of odd grasses.
Well,
Yeah.
I've done red clover, and you get lots of duct tape and lots of.
You know what? You can throw duct tape and silicone and all that shit away. You know what you use?
Well, I end up using some stick-on.
No,
no. Seals.
No, you don't have to do that. You go get yourself a diaper and put it underneath it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Big ranch out there in California, that's what they do. They got diapers on the machine. And in the morning when you're servicing, they unhook it and drive the machine ahead about 30 feet, and then they pick up the diaper and dump it in a pickup truck, and away they go. Next morning, do the same thing. And so it saves them time. They don't have to go gunk up the machine and keep looking for leaks when they captured it. There's a couple bushels in it at the end of the day, yeah. But they go off and do wheat and corn. They don't have to be that fussy because the seed's so much bigger. But this outfit out there in California has about 120,000 acres of seed alfalfa. So, and it's done green and that's a whole nother aspect of the business. But any other questions?
Well, there's one thing for sure, the introduction of axial flow brought a lot of new opportunities for the harvester company. And, early on, a lot of us thought just in terms like cleaning up the white caps in a wheat sample or something of that nature. And then all of a sudden, people started asking about exotic crops and harvesting. And it was Jim and a lot of people like him that made the difference in the introduction of the axial flow and the success of the axial flow.
Yeah.
All right. Did you have anything else?
No, I'm an hour over, so. But anyway, thank you for having me and your attention, and we'll see you around. I don't say goodbye.